Hello, MUS 2020 students. Welcome to the fourth and final video of audio effects in Ableton Live, which will cover studio utility effects. These are the effects that change an audio signal in a similar manner to what you would see on a mixing console, as well as some additional utility plugins that will be extremely useful in your projects. We're going to start with Auto Filter. Auto Filter emulates a variety of different filter modules. You can click on the different types over here, like a low pass, a high pass, a band pass, a notch, and state variable filter. They're all going to be very, very cool, but what they do will be slightly different depending on where you set the cutoff frequency. So for example, here is a low pass. And as I decrease the frequency, then anything that is above the frequency that I've set is reduced in amplitude. High pass is the reverse of that. Band pass creates a small band around the specified frequency, and anything that's within that band goes through. The band reject or notch is the opposite of that. And finally, we have state variable filter, which is really cool because it adds this morph knob into the mix. Which, as I use the morph, it changes between those, creating a really interesting timbre change that allows me to create some really interesting variations when I automate that. In addition to the frequency that I can set, I also have the resonance, which is the amount of the Q factor that is applied. So let me show you what that means. Basically what that's doing is it's adjusting the slope of the cutoff. If I leave it really low, then I have a nice smooth cutoff. As I increase it, I get a sharper and sharper cutoff. But once I hit about 100%, then it doesn't really make much change after that. But after I get above about 30%-ish, you'll notice that I start to have a little bit of a bump here right at the cutoff frequency. That is emulated on analog circuitry, and it can be really, really useful in order to give it just a little bit more definition at the cutoff point before it tapers off. Especially if you're going to sweep the filter like that. So very fun. There's also an LFO, or low frequency oscillator, built into this that will let you sweep the cutoff frequency up and down from where it's set. So let's just apply that. And then by turning up the rate, I can speed up that sweep. I can change the shape. And if I desire, I can change the phase. Although in this case, that's a very subtle distinction. Let's move on to the auto pan. This is something that people tend to use a little bit too much as opposed to actually panning things. But the way that it works is that auto pan automatically takes a signal and moves things to the left or the right. If you're wearing headphones, this is very, very evident. So you set the rate. The amount controls how far to either side the signal will be spread. And then with the phase, you can adjust it to change the relationship between the signal that goes to the left and the signal that goes to the right until they're either perfectly in sync or perfectly opposite. You can use the shape to morph it, or you can select a different type of shape down here. But eventually everything will morph into a perfect either fully on or fully off type square shape. As I said, this tends to be a little overused as a substitute for actual panning, so don't do that. Let's go back to the EQ, specifically the channel EQ. This is meant to emulate an equalizer on a mixing console. You have 3 bands, low, mid, and high. You have a built-in high-pass filter, which you can set, and then you can use that. Doing this, you can shape the sound. This number up here is the mid frequency, so you can use that to set where the mids are. And then you can see how that applies to the signal using the built-in spectrogram view. So here I filtered out the highs, I'm filtering out the lows, I'm just focusing on that mid frequency. But having the graphics displayed makes it very easy to see what you're doing, and some people find that to be very helpful. The other EQ that you have built in is EQ3, which is very similar to a DJ mixer style EQ. So you can set a high and you can set a low frequency, and then the mid will be between the two of those. Then you can use the knobs up here for the gain, or you can use the activator switches to toggle those. So if I wanted to get rid of the mids, I could just click on the M toggle, and they're muted. So very cool. You can change those frequencies. You can adjust the individual gains. You can change the roll-off of 24 or 48 dB, where it filters between the low to the mid and the mid to the high. It's very, very fun to play with, and you can do some really good stuff with shaping. So, a lot of fun. Moving on, though, now we have a new device that's in live intro for the first time. That is the LFO. And the LFO doesn't do anything as a device in and of itself. What it is it's a low-frequency oscillator. This is an oscillator that produces a waveform below the range of human hearing. In this case, it's going to be between, 1 hertz, 0 hertz, all the way up to 40 hertz, but a default of 1. So what do you do with that? Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm going to grab another device here. I'm going to use an auto filter. And then I'm going to set that into morph mode. Then what I do is I click on map on LFO. I click the knob I want it to map to, in this case, morph. I'll take that down so you can hear it. I'm going to take my frequency down as well. So now you can see what's happening is that this is now changing the values of morph based on the rate. I can change the depth so that it will give it the full range of values. I can set it to sync to a specific amount of time using hertz, or I can set it to sync to a subdivision of the live tempo if I set it to the note value. Now with this, I do have a couple options here for different waveforms. I can do smooth, I can have it ramp up and then it will jump back to 0, ramp down, I can do triangle motion, I can do square motion, I can do random. That's kind of a cool one. With this to really take effect, though, I do need to have everything playing in order for it to work with random. But that also helps to have faster rate values so you can see it. Then I can always go to bin, which is binary mode. That's just on or off. There is nothing in between. It's full on, full off. I can also map the values here. Oh, we'll take that back down. The values here, the minimum currently is set to 81. I can take that down to 0. Output is currently set to 100. I can add a certain amount of jitter to the waveform. And the cool thing is, if I click on the menu button up here, I can map this out to different parameters. So I've got it set to map out to the morph button. I can also map it out to, the internal LFO's phase as well. And then I could set that to a different parameter. Let's do 41 to 100. Take my jitter down again. And my smooth. There we go. And now, if I hit play, you'll hear the changes it's making. So super fun device, super powerful. This is a classic in synthesizer techniques. You can use LFOs to modulate pretty much anything. This is hands down one of my favorite devices here in Ableton Live. Beyond that, let's get into the tuner. The tuner is, at its most basic, a tuner. So, for those of you who play a musical instrument or sing and need to tune your instrument, you know exactly what this is going to do. If I hit a note, it tells me what the note is and how close I am to being perfectly in tune. So in this case, I am 1.1 cents too sharp. So I could adjust that down here in my device pretty easily with the detune knob. Too much. But because this is meant to mimic an analog device, there will be a little bit of octave drift. So yeah, it lets you know if you're in tune. You can set the reference, you can change it, you can take a look at different values using this different histogram view as opposed to the classic view. It does not play well with chords though, just FYI. Finally, we have utility. This is kind of a Swiss Army knife for an audio track. It lets you do things like invert the phase of the left and the right channel. So if you hear, you're playing through and there's just a lack of bass in particular on the left side or the right side, this is really good. You can invert the phase and that will tell you if you are in fact dealing with a phase cancellation issue, and you'll hear it because the bass will get louder in that channel. You can take a track and you can make it go all the way to the left. You can make it go to stereo. You can make it go all the way to right. You can swap the left and the right channels if you want to. You can adjust the stereo width. If you take it down to 0, that will be mono. If you take it to 100, then it's normal. And then above 100, we'll make it even wider. With this, you can also go to mono mode, which you're not going to hear anything yet with this particular track because it's been playing mono the entire time. But that would collapse a stereo effect or a stereo instrument down to only playing the exact same thing on both the left and the right channel. don't do that for the most part. Then there's other things you can do. You can change the output gain. So maybe you've got the volume cranked on your instrument. It's all the way up. It's super, super loud, or at least it should be, but it's still too quiet when you actually listen to it. This will help. You can also use the balance to pan the signal anywhere. You can mute it. You can add a DC offset and filter out the DC offsets or the bottom frequencies that might be in there.